Dad, they broke Mr. Torres's watch. Emma's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through me like broken glass. She stood in my parents' doorway, her small hands trembling, cheeks streaked with tears that hadn't stopped since I'd gotten the call. The kind of crying that comes from witnessing something you can't undo, something that changes how you see the people you're supposed to trust. I knelt down and pulled her close, feeling her shake against my chest. Behind her, through the open door, I could hear my sister Rebecca's voice, sharp and dismissive as always. It was old David. Probably wasn't even real silver. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. We're helping them downsize. This is what family does. I closed my eyes and held my daughter tighter. The watch wasn't just old. It was a 1920s heirloom that Michael Torres had carried across an ocean. The last piece of his grandfather's legacy, engraved with names in Tagalog that connected him to a family tree older than this country. He'd shown it to us 6 months ago in his small studio, his weathered hands cradling it like it held his entire history. Because it did. And now it was gone. Destroyed. Not lost. Not stolen. Destroyed by my own family while my 8-year-old daughter watched and begged them to stop. I stood up slowly, Emma's hand still gripping mine. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another text from my mother. Please don't make a scene. Rebecca didn't mean harm. You know how she gets. Let's just move past this. I looked down at Emma's swollen eyes, at the way she was trying so hard to be brave, and something inside me made a decision that had been building for longer than I wanted to admit. I wasn't moving past this. Not this time. The drive to my parents' house in West Lynn usually took 20 minutes, but that Sunday it felt like 20 seconds. Emma sat in the back seat, silent now, clutching the stuffed rabbit her mother had given her before she died. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, watching her stare out the window at the autumn leaves blurring past. She'd been so excited that morning. Mr. Torres had finally agreed to let her perform in the winter recital, her first real concert. She'd practiced for weeks, her small fingers stumbling over the keys of our second-hand piano until the melody became smooth and sure. Michael never charged us for lessons. Not once. After my wife Sarah died 2 years ago, and the medical bills had drained everything we'd saved, he'd simply shown up one Saturday morning and offered to teach Emma for free. Music heals, he'd said in his gentle accent. Let me help her find some light. My parents had invited us to Sunday dinner. Nothing unusual about that. Rebecca was in town from Seattle, sorting through old family items for what she called a strategic estate sale. She'd been texting the family group chat for weeks about how much money was hidden in our parents' basement, how they were sitting on a gold mine and didn't even know it. Mom had asked me to bring Emma because Rebecca wanted to meet her niece properly. They hadn't seen each other in over a year. I should have known better. I should have seen the pattern. But hope makes you stupid sometimes, makes you think people might finally change. We'd arrived at noon. The house smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary, the same smell from every Sunday dinner of my childhood. Rebecca was in the living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes and bubble wrap, wearing expensive athleisure and barking orders at our father about proper packing techniques. She barely looked up when we walked in. David, she said, not quite a greeting. Emma, you've gotten so tall. Then back to the boxes. Emma had brought her sheet music to show Grandma, but Mom was busy in the kitchen, fretting over the meal and asking me in hushed tones to please not let Rebecca stress her out. So Emma wandered toward the den where my father was watching a football game, and I followed Rebecca into what used to be my childhood bedroom, now converted into a storage space for 3 generations of accumulated belongings. She was holding up a tarnished picture frame, squinting at it. Does this look Victorian to you? She asked. Could be worth something. I told her I had no idea. She shrugged and tossed it into a box labeled donate. That's when Emma came running in, her face bright with excitement. Dad, look. Grandpa has Mr. Torres's watch. He said Mr. Torres gave it to him to look at. My stomach dropped. No, Michael would never. I walked quickly into the den. My father was sitting in his recliner, turning over a small brass pocket watch in his hands, holding it up to the light. Where did you get that? I asked, keeping my voice level. Michael dropped it off yesterday, Dad said casually. Asked if I knew anyone who could appraise it. Wanted to see if it was worth insuring. Said he'd pick it up next week. Relief washed over me. Okay, so it was safe. Michael trusted my father, had asked for help. That made sense. Rebecca appeared in the doorway behind me. Let me see that, she said, reaching for it. Dad handed it over without hesitation. She turned it over in her hands, frowning. This is filthy. And the engraving's not even in English. Probably some mass-produced import. Snot, I said. It's an heirloom. From the Philippines. It's important to him. Rebecca rolled her eyes. Everything's an heirloom to someone, David. Doesn't mean it's valuable. Emma tugged on my sleeve. Dad, we should keep it safe. Mr. Torres loves that watch. He showed me the pictures inside. His wife is in there. I know, sweetheart. We'll make sure it gets back to him. But Rebecca was already walking toward the kitchen, still holding the watch, and I felt the first pulse of real anxiety. I followed her. She set it on the counter, right next to where Mom was chopping vegetables, and started rummaging through drawers. Rebecca, I said, just put it back in the den. We'll give it back to Michael when he comes by. She waved me off. I'm looking for silver polish. If we're going to get it appraised properly, it should at least be clean. It doesn't need to be polished, I said more firmly now. It needs to be left alone. Mom glanced between us, her knife pausing mid-slice. David, don't start. Rebecca's just trying to help. I wasn't starting anything. I was trying to stop something. But no one was listening. Rebecca found a jar of tarnish remover under the sink, the industrial kind that smelled like chemicals and impatience. She grabbed a rough sponge from the dish rack. Emma had followed us into the kitchen. Her eyes went wide. Mr. Torres said never to use anything rough on it, she said, her voice small. Could scratch the engraving. Rebecca didn't even look at her. Sweetie, I've been cleaning antiques for 15 years. I know what I'm doing. She started scrubbing. Hard. The kind of scrubbing you use on a stubborn pan, not a century-old piece of history. I reached for the watch. Rebecca, stop. You're going to damage it. She pulled it away from me, annoyed. Oh, relax. It's fine. But it wasn't fine. I could see it wasn't fine. The engraving was smudging under the abrasive sponge, the delicate lines blurring. Emma saw it too. Stop, she said louder now. Please stop. You're hurting it. Rebecca laughed. A short, dismissive sound. Hurting it? Emma, it's a watch. It doesn't have feelings. Tears were already forming in Emma's eyes. Please, she said again. Mr. Torres will be so sad. Mom set down her knife. Rebecca, maybe just leave it. We can give it back as is. But Rebecca was in that mode she got into, the one where admitting she might be wrong felt like losing. She kept scrubbing harder, frustrated now. This grime won't come off. Might be corrosion. Might be beyond saving. It's not grime, I said. It's patina. Supposed to look like that. She ignored me. Then she did something I'll never forget. She held the watch under scalding hot water from the tap and started scrubbing the inside mechanism, trying to open it with a butter knife from the counter. Emma screamed. No. The knife slipped. There was a crack. Then a metallic tinkle as tiny gears. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Gears and springs scattered across the counter and into the sink. Silence. Rebecca stared at the broken watch in her hand, the face now cracked, the hands frozen. Oops, she said. Well, it was already broken. That's probably why he wanted it appraised. To make an insurance claim. My vision narrowed. She was already building her defense, already rewriting what had just happened. Emma's sobs filled the kitchen, raw and gasping. Mom reached for her. Oh, honey, it's okay. It was an accident. It wasn't an accident. It was carelessness. It was arrogance. It was the same pattern I'd watched my entire life. Rebecca barreling through other people's boundaries and everyone else cleaning up behind her. I picked up the pieces from the counter. Some of the gears had fallen down the garbage disposal. The crystal face was spiderwebbed with cracks. The engraving, the names of Michael's grandfather and grandmother, was gouged and illegible. This was the watch Michael's wife had held in her hands the day before she died. He'd told us that. He'd cried when he told us that. Emma was inconsolable now, and I picked her up even though she was getting too big for it, and held her while she cried into my shoulder. Rebecca set the watch down on the counter like it was a broken dish. I'll reimburse him, she said. What's something like that worth? 200. 3. I couldn't speak. If I spoke, I would say things I couldn't take back. Mom stepped in, her voice pleading. David, these things happen. She didn't mean to. Let's just figure out how to make it right. But Emma lifted her head from my shoulder, her face red and wet, and said something that broke me even more. He trusted us. Mr. Torres trusted us, and we broke his heart. Out of the mouths of children. I looked at my mother, at my father who had wandered in and was standing uselessly by the fridge, at Rebecca who was already checking her phone like the conversation was over. I looked at the pieces of Michael's history scattered on the counter, and I made a decision. I'm taking these, I said quietly. All of them. Every piece. I'm taking them to someone who might be able to restore it. And Rebecca, you're paying for it. Whatever it costs. She scoffed. David, be realistic. It's a broken watch. I'll give him 500 and call it done. No, I said. You'll pay what it actually costs. Because this isn't about money. This is about the fact that you destroyed something irreplaceable because you couldn't be bothered to listen. Mom reached for my arm. Please don't do this. Not in front of Emma. I pulled away gently. Emma's the only one here who understood what mattered. I gathered every piece I could find, even checking the drain trap in the sink. Rebecca watched me with her arms crossed. You're being dramatic, she said. That's what you always do. Turn everything into some moral crisis. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I'm just tired of watching you break things and walk away. I carried Emma out to the car. She was still crying, quieter now, exhausted. As I buckled her in, she looked up at me with those eyes that still had her mother's softness in them. Are you going to fix it, Dad? I don't know, sweetheart. But I'm going to try. What if you can't? Then I'm going to make sure Mr. Torres knows we tried. That we cared. That not everyone in our family thinks his memories are worthless. She nodded and closed her eyes. I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, staring at the bag of broken pieces in my passenger seat. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. You're overreacting. It's just stuff. Then one from Mom. Please come back. Let's talk this through. Let's keep the peace. I didn't respond to either. I started the car and drove home. But I wasn't going home to forget. I was going home to plan. Because 3 months ago, after one too many comments from Rebecca about how I was raising Emma wrong, about how I was too soft, too sentimental, I'd done something I wasn't proud of but turned out to be necessary. I'd installed a security camera in my parents' living room. They'd asked me to. They were getting older, worried about break-ins, and I worked in tech-adjacent fields through my architecture firm. It was a simple setup. Cloud-based. Motion-activated. And it had been recording the entire time we were there today. I had everything. Every word. Every dismissive laugh. Every moment of Emma begging them to stop. I pulled into my driveway and sat there as the autumn sun dipped below the roofline. Emma had fallen asleep in the back, her face still streaked with dried tears. I looked at the bag of broken pieces again. At my phone. At the camera app icon. And I opened my laptop. Not to check the footage yet. But to open a folder I'd started months ago. Contingency plans. Documentation. Patterns of behavior. I'd been collecting for a while now, not because I wanted to, but because somewhere deep down I knew this day was coming. I just didn't know it would hurt this much. Or that it would take my daughter's tears to finally make me stop hoping my family would change. The watch couldn't be unbroken. But maybe finally the cycle could be. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after we got home, watching Emma sleep in the back seat through the rearview mirror. Her breathing had finally evened out, the hitching sobs replaced by the deep rhythm of exhaustion. Tear tracks had dried on her cheeks, leaving faint salt lines that caught the last of the afternoon light. I didn't want to wake her. Didn't want to bring her back into the reality of what had happened. In sleep, she didn't have to remember the sound of that watch breaking. Didn't have to carry the weight of being the only person in that kitchen who understood what was being destroyed. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel even though the engine was off. I could feel the tension radiating up my forearms, settling into my shoulders, the kind of physical stress that comes from holding yourself back when every instinct screams to let go. I wanted to shout in that kitchen. Wanted to sweep all of Rebecca's carefully labeled boxes off the counter and watch her precious inventory scatter across the floor. Wanted to make her feel a fraction of the helplessness Emma had felt, standing there begging adults to listen and being dismissed like her words were just noise. But I hadn't. Because Emma was watching. Because losing control in front of her would have added my failure to an already unbearable day. So I'd stayed calm, stayed measured, and walked out with whatever dignity I could salvage. Now, sitting in my own driveway, that restraint felt like it was calcifying inside me, hardening into something else. Not anger exactly. Something colder. More permanent. My phone lit up on the dashboard. Another text from my mother. This one longer than the first. David, I know you're upset and you have every right to be. But Rebecca really didn't mean any harm. She's going through a difficult time with the divorce and the business struggles. She gets focused on the wrong things when she's stressed. Please don't let this become bigger than it needs to be. Emma will forget about it in a few days. Children are resilient. Can we just move forward? I read it twice, then set the phone face down without responding. Emma will forget. That phrase sat in my chest like a stone. My mother actually believed that. Believed that my daughter would simply forget watching someone destroy an object that represented kindness, trust, and memory. Would forget the feeling of being ignored when she tried to protect something that mattered. Would forget that the adults she was supposed to rely on chose convenience over conscience. Sarah would have known better. My wife would have seen exactly what I was seeing, would have understood that this wasn't about a watch at all. It was about what Emma was learning about how people treat each other, about whether speaking up matters, about what happens when you trust the wrong people with something precious. Sarah had always been better at naming those moments, at pulling the real lesson out of the chaos. I missed that clarity. Missed her. Emma stirred in the back seat, her eyes fluttering open. For a brief, merciful second she looked peaceful. Then memory returned and her expression crumpled. Dad, she said softly. Did that really happen? I turned to face her fully. Yeah, sweetheart. It really happened. She unbuckled herself and climbed over the center console into the front passenger seat. Something she knew she wasn't supposed to do, but I didn't have the heart to correct. She pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself small. Mr. Torres is going to be so sad. I know. Are you going to tell him? I have to. He trusted us with something important. He deserves to know the truth. She was quiet for a moment, picking at a loose thread on her jeans. Aunt Rebecca didn't even say sorry. No, she didn't. Why not? I chose my words carefully. Some people have a hard time admitting when they've made a mistake. Feels like losing to them. So they find ways to make it seem like it wasn't really a mistake, or like it wasn't really their fault, or like it doesn't matter as much as you think it does. But it does matter. Yes, it does. Emma leaned her head against the window. I tried to stop her, Dad. I really tried. That's the thing I couldn't get past. My 8-year-old daughter had more moral clarity in that kitchen than 3 adults combined. She'd advocated for someone who wasn't there to defend himself, had recognized the value of something beyond its price tag, had understood instinctively that breaking trust was worse than breaking an object. And she'd been ignored. Worse than ignored. Patronized. Dismissed as a child who didn't understand how the world worked. You did everything right, I told her. You spoke up. You tried to protect something that mattered. That took courage. It didn't work though. Not this time. But that doesn't mean you were wrong to try. She absorbed that in the way children do, turning it over in her mind, testing it against her experience. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. Are we still going to go to Grandma and Grandpa's house? I didn't answer right away. The truth was complicated, layered with years of family dynamics and patterns. I was only now beginning to see clearly. My parents weren't malicious. They were conflict avoidant, which sometimes caused just as much damage. They'd spent decades smoothing over Rebecca's behavior, rationalizing it, reframing it, asking everyone else to be understanding because confronting her was too uncomfortable. And I participated in that pattern. Had absorbed the lesson that keeping peace was more important than keeping boundaries, that being the stable one meant absorbing the chaos others created. But watching Emma in that kitchen had cracked something open. Made me see that teaching her to accept that pattern would be its own kind of betrayal. I think we need some space from them for a while, I said finally. Until some things change. What things? The way they handle problems. The way they listen. The way they treat people's feelings. She nodded slowly. Okay. Then after a pause, I'm glad you're not making me pretend it's okay. Something in my chest unclenched slightly. I'm not going to do that. Not anymore. We went inside. The house felt too quiet, the way it often did on Sundays when we came home and Sarah wasn't there to ask about our day, to fill the space with her easy conversation and the cooking sounds that always meant home. Emma headed straight to her room, and I heard her door close softly. Not a slam. She didn't slam doors. She just withdrew, pulled into herself the way she had after Sarah died. And I hated that my family had put that look back in her eyes. I set the bag of watch pieces on the kitchen counter and spread them out carefully on a clean dish towel. The brass face with its spider web of cracks. The bent hands frozen at 3:15. Tiny gears and springs, some no bigger than a grain of rice. The backing that had held the photographs, now scratched and dented. I picked up the piece with the engraving, or what was left of it. The names were still partially visible, though gouged and distorted. I could make out what looked like Vicente and Rosario, Michael's grandparents, the ones who had carried this watch through immigration, through war, through poverty, through decades of building a life in a country that didn't always want them. This wasn't just metal and mechanics. It was evidence of survival. And my sister had destroyed it while checking her phone. I pulled out my laptop and opened the security camera app. The footage was organized by date and time, motion-activated segments stored in the cloud. I scrolled to today, to the timestamp that corresponded with our arrival. The camera was positioned in the corner of the den, angled to cover the main living areas and part of the kitchen. Premium quality. High definition. I'd installed it myself. I pressed play. The first few minutes were mundane. Emma and me arriving, Rebecca barely looking up from her boxes, Mom fussing in the kitchen. Normal family Sunday afternoon. Then Emma walking into the den. Dad handing her the watch to look at. Her face lighting up as she recognized it. Rebecca entering the frame. The moment she reached for it. I watched the entire sequence play out again, this time with audio. Emma's voice clear and earnest. Mr. Torres said never to use anything rough on it. Could scratch the engraving. Rebecca's dismissive laugh. Sweetie, I've been cleaning antiques for 15 years. I know what I'm doing. My own voice tighter now, trying to intervene. Rebecca, stop. You're going to damage it. Her pulling the watch away, annoyed. Oh, relax. It's fine. Then Emma again, louder, more desperate. Stop. Please stop. You're hurting it. And Rebecca's response. Casual cruelty wrapped in condescension. Hurting it? Emma, it's a watch. It doesn't have feelings. I paused the video there. Stared at Rebecca's face frozen on screen, that particular expression she wore when she thought she was being reasonable and everyone else was being dramatic. That expression I'd seen my entire life, every time she'd borrowed something and returned it broken. Every time she'd made a decision that affected others without asking. Every time someone suggested she might be wrong. I backed up the footage and watched Emma's face instead. The moment hope died in her eyes. The moment she realized the adults weren't going to listen, weren't going to stop, weren't going to protect what she was trying to protect. 8 years old and already learning that speaking up doesn't always matter, that being right doesn't always win, that sometimes people with power just do what they want regardless. That was the moment that settled it for me. Not the watch breaking. That moment right there when Emma's voice broke and she kept trying anyway. I exported the video file. Saved it to 3 different locations. Then I opened a document I'd started months ago and hadn't wanted to admit I was keeping. It was titled Family Patterns and it contained dated entries going back almost 2 years. Small things at first. Rebecca showing up to Sarah's memorial service 2 hours late because she'd stopped for brunch and lost track of time. Not apologizing, just breezing in and asking if she'd missed anything important. Rebecca borrowing my parents' car and returning it with an empty tank and a new dent, telling them it had been like that already. Rebecca promising to contribute to Dad's birthday gift and then never sending money, letting Mom cover her portion without acknowledgement. Bigger things too. Last Christmas when she'd opened Emma's present in front of everyone, a set of art supplies Emma had saved her allowance for weeks to buy and said, "Oh honey, these are the cheap kind. I'll show you which brands are actually worth getting." Emma had cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes. I'd talked to Rebecca about it later in private, and she'd rolled her eyes. She's too sensitive. You're raising her to be soft. The loan application 6 months ago that showed up in my credit report. Someone had tried to open a line of credit using my information. I'd flagged it immediately, launched an investigation. The application had been submitted from an IP address in Seattle, Rebecca's city. I'd never confronted her directly because I couldn't prove it definitively, but I'd started paying for credit monitoring services after that. Started checking my statements more carefully. Started, without quite admitting it to myself, preparing for the next thing. Now there was the watch. And the footage. And Emma's tears. I added today's date to the document. Wrote out exactly what had happened, clinical and detailed. Noted the witnesses. Attached the video file. Then I sat back and looked at the pattern laid out across 2 years of documentation. What I saw was a person who moved through the world taking what she wanted and leaving damage in her wake. Protected by a family system that had decided accountability was less important than harmony. My phone buzzed. Rebecca this time. David, stop being melodramatic. I said I'd reimburse him. What more do you want? A public flogging? You've always had this savior complex. Not everything is a moral crisis. I stared at that message for a long time. The savior complex part stung because there was truth in it, or there had been. I had spent years trying to be the good son, the stable one, the person who could absorb conflict and transmute it into peace. After Sarah died, that instinct had intensified. I'd wanted Emma to have family, to have connection, to have the kind of support network that might cushion her grief. So I'd overlooked things, minimized things, told myself that keeping family together mattered more than addressing every small harm. But this wasn't small. And Emma's grief didn't need protection from loneliness. It needed protection from people who would teach her that her voice didn't matter. I didn't respond to Rebecca's text. Instead, I pulled up my email and wrote to Michael Torres. It took me 40 minutes to compose 3 paragraphs. I explained what had happened as clearly and honestly as I could. I didn't minimize it or make excuses. I told him I had the pieces, that I was looking into restoration options, that I would cover all costs personally. I apologized not just for the damage but for the breach of trust, for bringing his treasured possession into an environment where it wasn't treated with the care it deserved. Then I added one more thing. Emma wanted you to know that she tried to stop it. She understood what the watch meant to you, and she fought for it harder than any of the adults in the room. I'm so sorry that her voice wasn't enough. She's been crying all afternoon, not for herself but for you. I thought you should know that at least one person there honored what you entrusted to us. I read it over 3 times before sending it. Then I closed the laptop and went to check on Emma. Her door was cracked open. She was sitting on her bed with her sheet music spread around her, but she wasn't looking at it. She was holding the stuffed rabbit, the one Sarah had given her, and staring at the wall. The piano music was for the winter recital, the Clementi sonatina she'd been working on for months. Michael had chosen it specifically for her, said it had a hopefulness in the melody that matched her spirit. Can I come in? I asked from the doorway. She nodded. I sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to disturb the sheet music. I just sent Mr. Torres an email, I told her. Let him know what happened. Her eyes filled up again. Is he going to be mad at me? No, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. You did everything right. But I was supposed to keep him company at Grandma's house. I was supposed to make sure his watch was safe. Emma, you're 8. You shouldn't have to protect adults from other adults. But you weren't there. I was the only one there. The weight of that statement hit me hard. She was right. I'd been in the other room when it started, had come in too late to prevent it, only in time to watch it finish. She'd been alone in that kitchen, advocating for someone who couldn't advocate for himself, facing down grown-ups who had all the power. You know what I think? I said. I think Mr. Torres is going to be heartbroken about his watch, but I think he's going to be proud of you, because you showed him that his trust wasn't misplaced, that you understood what mattered. Even though I couldn't save it, even though sometimes doing the right thing doesn't mean you win, just means you were right. She leaned against me, still holding the rabbit. Are you going to be able to fix the watch? I'm going to try. I found a restoration specialist in Portland who works with antique timepieces. I'm going to take the pieces to him tomorrow and see what can be done. But Emma, I need you to understand something. Even if he can repair the mechanics, the watch will never be exactly what it was. Some damage can't be completely undone. Like when Mom died. The comparison caught me off guard, but she was right. Yeah, like that. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, the autumn evening was settling in. the light going golden and soft through her window. Somewhere in the neighborhood, kids were playing, their voices carrying on the cooling air. Normal Sunday sounds. Normal life continuing around us while we sat with something broken that we didn't know how to fix. Emma spoke first. Dad? Are you mad at Aunt Rebecca? I thought about how to answer that honestly without burdening her with adult complexity. I'm disappointed. And I'm sad that she doesn't seem to understand what she did. But mostly I'm just tired of watching her hurt people and having everyone pretend it's okay. Are you going to tell her that? Eventually. When I figure out how. What if she doesn't listen? Then at least I'll know I tried. And I'll make different choices about how much time we spend with her. She absorbed that, then asked quietly. Is that okay? To just stop seeing family if they're mean? It's not just about being mean. It's about patterns. If someone keeps hurting you or people you care about, and they don't try to change, then it's okay to create distance. Family doesn't mean you have to accept being hurt over and over. She nodded, fitting that into her understanding of the world. I could see her processing it, rearranging her mental categories. She was too young to be learning these lessons, but the alternative was letting her think this was normal, acceptable, something she should tolerate in her own life someday. I kissed the top of her head. You hungry? I can make grilled cheese. Can we watch a movie after? Yeah, we can watch a movie. I left her to gather up her sheet music and went back downstairs. My phone had accumulated more texts while I was gone. Mom again more pleading. Rebecca more defensive. My father his first message of the day. Son, let's not blow this out of proportion. These things happen. Let's just move on. I didn't answer any of them. Instead I made grilled cheese and tomato soup, Emma's comfort meal, the thing Sarah used to make whenever one of us had a bad day. We ate in the living room with a Pixar movie neither of us were really watching. Just needing the distraction of color and movement, and a story where problems got resolved in 90 minutes. Halfway through, Emma's head drooped against my shoulder. She was asleep before the third act began, exhausted from crying, from caring, from trying to be heard. I turned off the TV and just sat there with her sleeping weight against me, feeling the full scope of what had shifted today. I'd spent 2 years since Sarah's death trying to hold things together, trying to be enough parent for Emma, enough son for my parents, enough brother to maintain peace. I told myself that stability mattered more than confrontation, that Emma needed consistency more than she needed me to fight every battle. But today had shown me the cost of that calculus. The cost was Emma learning to swallow injustice, learning that her voice didn't matter as much as adult convenience, learning the same lessons that had shaped my own tolerance for dysfunction. I wasn't going to teach her that. Not anymore. The email notification chimed softly on my phone. Michael Torres had responded already. I shifted carefully to read it without waking Emma. David, thank you for your honesty. I won't lie to you. My heart is broken. That watch was the last physical connection I had to my grandparents, to my wife, to a history that I can't replace. But I want you to know something. In my 70 years, I've learned that what matters most isn't the objects we keep, but the people who understand why we keep them. Emma understood. You understand. That means more to me than any amount of money or apology from people who never valued it in the first place. Please don't let this damage your relationship with your family on my account. I've lost enough in this life. I don't want to be the reason you lose more. But also, please tell Emma that her tears were not wasted. That someone saw her trying. That her heart is as beautiful as her mother's was. I'll come by this week to get the pieces. Perhaps they can be restored. Perhaps not. Either way, I don't blame you or your daughter. You both showed me that kindness still exists, even when it isn't enough to prevent harm. That matters. I read it 3 times, my throat tight. The grace in those words. The way he centered Emma's feelings even while grieving his own loss. This was the man my sister had dismissed. The person my mother thought would just accept $500 and move on. They didn't know him. Didn't know that Michael had lost his wife to Alzheimer's 3 years ago. Had spent every day of her final year playing her favorite songs on the guitar because music was the only thing that still reached her. Didn't know that he lived on a fixed income in a small studio but gave free music lessons to any child whose parents couldn't afford them. Didn't know that the watch had belonged to his grandfather who'd fought for the Philippine Scouts in World War II, who'd carried it through Bataan, who'd given it to his grandson as he lay dying with a whisper. This is our proof. We survived. You carry it forward. Rebecca had broken proof. Had broken survival. Had broken forward. And she thought $500 would cover it. I carried Emma up to her bed. Tucked her in still fully clothed because she needed the sleep more than she needed pajamas. Then I went back downstairs to my laptop and opened the security footage one more time. This time I didn't watch the destruction. I watched the aftermath. The moment after the watch broke when everyone froze. Mom's face, shocked but already calculating how to minimize. Dad's face, uncomfortable but passive. Rebecca's face, defensive irritation that she'd been caught making a mistake. And Emma's face. Pure devastation. Not for herself. For someone else. I made a new folder on my desktop. Named it Michael Torres Watch. Started organizing everything. The footage. The photographs I'd taken of the watch pieces. Michael's emails. The documentation of what it would cost to restore, if restoration was even possible. I wasn't sure yet what I'd do with it all. But I was done pretending documentation was paranoid or excessive. It was protection. Evidence. Proof that I wasn't misremembering or exaggerating or being too sensitive. My phone rang. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. She left a long message I could hear playing through the speaker. David, please call me back. Your father and I are worried about you. Rebecca feels terrible. She really does. She just has a hard time expressing it. She wants to make this right, but she doesn't know how when you won't talk to her. Can we all just sit down and discuss this like adults? For Emma's sake? She needs her family. Please don't teach her to hold grudges. Call me back. Please. For Emma's sake. The phrase that had controlled me for 2 years. The trump card that ended every argument. Settled every dispute in favor of maintaining connection regardless of cost. But Emma wasn't asking for family. Emma was asking for protection. For someone to acknowledge that what happened was wrong. That her tears were valid. That the adults who ignored her should face consequences. I wasn't teaching her to hold grudges. I was teaching her that boundaries were possible. That self-respect mattered. That you didn't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. I texted my mother back. One sentence. I need space right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Then I turned off my phone. The house settled into nighttime silence. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, the creak of floorboards adjusting to temperature change. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and the watch pieces spread before me, and for the first time since Sarah died, I let myself feel angry. Not the hot flash of reactive anger, but the deep, cold burn of understanding that I'd been enabling harm. That my desire to keep peace had made me complicit in teaching Emma that being quiet was safer than being heard. Sarah would have stopped this years ago, would have drawn clear lines with my family, would have protected Emma's emotional development more fiercely than I had. I told myself I was honoring her memory by keeping Emma connected to family, but maybe I'd just been afraid. Afraid of more loss. Afraid of conflict. Afraid of being the bad guy in someone else's story. But today, watching Emma cry for someone else's pain, I'd realized something. Being the good guy in your own family's story doesn't matter if you're teaching your daughter that her voice is worth less than artificial peace. I closed the laptop and looked at the watch pieces one more time. Tomorrow I'd take them to the restoration specialist. Would find out if the damage could be repaired, or if Michael's history was permanently lost. Would start making whatever amends were possible, even though amends couldn't undo what had been done. But tonight I just sat with what had broken. The watch. The trust. The illusion that family always meant safety. The hope that maybe this time would be different, that maybe Rebecca would show growth, that maybe my parents would finally choose accountability over avoidance. All of it broken on a Sunday afternoon while my daughter begged adults to listen. And now I had a choice. Sweep it up, minimize the damage, return to normal. Or let it stay broken. Let everyone see exactly what had shattered. Let the consequences be real. I thought about Emma sleeping upstairs, exhausted from caring too much. Thought about Michael Torres and the grace in his grief. Thought about Sarah and what she would have wanted me to teach our daughter about self-respect and boundaries, and the difference between keeping peace and keeping silent. The choice was already made. I just had to follow through. I opened my laptop one more time and started typing an email. Not to my family. To a lawyer. Because I was done being the understanding one. Done being the stable one who absorbed everyone else's chaos. Done teaching my daughter that love meant tolerating harm. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow I would take the first step towards something I should have done years ago. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just boundaries. Real ones. The kind that protect instead of placate. The kind that say this far and no further. The kind that mean it. The email took an hour to write. When I finished, I read it over once, then hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I turned off all the lights and went upstairs. Checked on Emma one more time. She'd rolled over in her sleep, still clutching Sarah's rabbit. Still my little girl. Still learning how the world worked from watching what I did more than hearing what I said. I stood in her doorway for a long time, watching her breathe, and made a promise to the daughter sleeping and the wife who wasn't here to help me keep it. I would teach Emma that her voice mattered. That standing up for what's right was worth the cost. That family was supposed to be safe, and when it wasn't, creating distance was an act of love, not betrayal. Tomorrow I would start showing her what that looked like. Tonight I just stood guard while she slept, the way I should have stood guard in that kitchen. Better late than never. Better now than after she'd learned all the wrong lessons. Better to be the father she needed than the son my parents wanted. The house was quiet. The watch was broken. The family was fracturing. And for the first time in 2 years I felt like I was finally doing the right thing. The restoration specialist shop was tucked between a vintage bookstore and a coffee roaster in Northwest Portland. The kind of neighborhood where old things were valued and craftsmanship still meant something. The sign above the door read Timekeeper's Haven in elegant script, and through the window I could see rows of antique clocks lining the walls, their pendulums swinging in silent coordination. I'd called ahead that morning, explained the situation in broad strokes, and the owner, a man named Gerald Hoffman, had agreed to see me immediately. Emma had asked to come with me. I'd initially said no, thinking she'd been through enough, but she'd insisted with a quiet determination that reminded me so much of Sarah it hurt. Mr. Torres trusted me too, she'd said. I should be there when we try to fix it. So we'd driven into the city together on a gray Monday morning. The bag of watch pieces sitting carefully in my lap like we were transporting something sacred. Which I suppose we were. Gerald was waiting for us inside. A man in his 70s with careful hands and wire-rimmed glasses that magnified eyes full of immediate sympathy. He gestured us to a work table in the back of the shop, away from the customer area, where the lighting was bright and clinical. I set the bag down gently and began removing the pieces, arranging them on the clean white cloth he'd laid out. He didn't touch anything at first. Just looked, his expression growing more somber with each piece I revealed. The cracked crystal face. The bent hands. The scratched backing. The springs and gears, some bent, some missing entirely. Finally, he picked up the piece with the engraving, turned it over slowly in his hands, and I watched his jaw tighten. Who did this? He asked quietly. My sister. She was trying to clean it. I couldn't make my voice anything but flat. Gerald set the piece down carefully like it might shatter further. Then he looked at Emma, who was standing very close to my side, her hand gripping my jacket. And you must be the young lady who tried to stop her. Emma nodded, her eyes already filling. I told her to stop. I told her it was special. He reached out and patted her hand gently. I can see that you understand what this watch represents. That's more than many adults ever learn. He turned back to the pieces, pulling a magnifying loupe from his pocket and beginning a more detailed examination. I watched him work in silence, noting the way his expression shifted from assessment to something closer to grief. After nearly 15 minutes, he sat back and removed the loupe. I need you to understand something before we discuss restoration. This watch is a Waltham manufactured sometime in the early 1920s. It's not particularly rare in terms of monetary value. You could find similar models at estate sales for a few $100s. But this specific watch has been customized, engraved, maintained, and carried through almost a century of someone's family history. That makes it irreplaceable in the ways that actually matter. I know I said, the owner is a friend. It belonged to his grandfather, came with him from the Philippines. His wife held it the day before she died. It's everything to him. Gerald nodded slowly. Then you need to know that what was done here goes beyond careless cleaning. The mechanism was forced open with an improper tool. You can see the pry marks here and here. Several gears are missing, likely fell down a drain or were swept away. The The crystal is cracked beyond simple replacement, because the impact also damaged the dial underneath. And this engraving, he held up the backing, was gouged by an abrasive compound that removed not just tarnish but the actual metal. The names are partially illegible now. Emma made a small sound beside me. I put my hand on her shoulder. Can you fix it? I asked. Any of it? Gerald was quiet for a long moment. I can attempt a restoration. I can source period-appropriate gears, though finding exact matches will take time. I can replace the crystal and repair the dial work. I can stabilize what remains of the engraving, though I cannot restore what's been removed. The watch may function again. It may even look similar to how it once did. But it will never be what it was. There will always be evidence of trauma. How much time? How much money? He calculated on a small notepad. Parts, labor, the research required to source appropriate components. I'd estimate 3 to 4 months of work, possibly longer. Costs would run between $4,000 and $6,000, and that's assuming I can find everything needed. Some of these gears may need to be custom fabricated. I didn't flinch. Whatever it takes. I'll pay whatever it costs. He studied me for a moment. Most people would walk away. Would tell their friend it's not worth that kind of investment for a watch with limited resale value. This isn't about resale value. No, he said softly. I can see that it's not. He began carefully gathering the pieces, placing each one in a small labeled bag. I'll start immediately. I'll document everything, photograph each stage of the work. And Mr. Chun, he looked up at me directly. I want you to know that I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing this because someone needs to try to undo this damage, and I have the skills to try. Some things shouldn't stay broken just because breaking them was easy. Emma spoke up then, her voice small but clear. Mr. Hoffman? Even if you can't fix it all the way, will Mr. Torres be able to tell we tried? Gerald's expression softened completely. He knelt down to her level. Young lady, every repair I make will show that someone cared enough to try. Every hour I spend on this will be evidence that his treasure mattered to people who weren't even his family. Yes, he'll be able to tell. She nodded, satisfied with that answer in a way I wasn't sure I was. We left the shop with a receipt and a promise that Gerald would call with updates every 2 weeks. The bag was lighter on the way out, empty of its broken contents, but I felt heavier. $4,000 to $6,000. 3 to 4 months. And still no guarantee that Michael would have back what had been taken from him. We drove to Emma's school and I walked her inside, later than usual, explaining to the front office that we'd had a family emergency. They didn't ask questions, just marked her tardy and sent her off to class. She hugged me before she went, harder than usual, and whispered thank you for trying to fix it. I watched her walk down the hallway until she turned the corner, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, and felt the weight of wanting to protect her from a lesson she'd already learned. My phone had been off since last night. I turned it on in the car and watched 23 notifications flood in. Texts, missed calls, voicemails. I scrolled through them without opening any. Rebecca. Mom. Dad. Rebecca again. My Aunt Susan, who I hadn't heard from in 6 months. Even my cousin Brandon, Rebecca's son, who rarely contacted me. The family network was activating, circling wagons, preparing their narrative. I deleted them all without reading or listening. Then I drove to my office. Morris Architecture occupied the 3rd floor of a renovated warehouse near the Pearl District. It was a small firm, just 8 of us, specializing in sustainable residential design. I'd been there for 6 years, worked my way up to senior architect, took pride in creating spaces that served how people actually lived rather than how design magazines thought they should live. My boss, Catherine Morris, was in her 60s, sharp and fair, and she looked up from her drafting table when I walked in. You look like hell, she said without preamble. Family emergency, I replied. Is Sarah available? Sarah Park was in her office, reviewing permit applications with the focused intensity she brought to everything. She glanced up when I knocked, took one look at my face and closed her laptop. Come in. Close the door. I did. Then I sat down heavily in the chair across from her desk and, for the first time since yesterday, let the facade crack. Sarah had been my closest friend since I'd started at the firm. She'd brought meals after Sarah died, had sat with Emma when I had late meetings, had never once suggested I should just move on or be grateful for what I had. She was the kind of person who understood that sometimes support meant just sitting with. someone in their anger without trying to fix it. What happened? She asked. I told her everything. The watch. The kitchen. Emma's tears. Rebecca's dismissal. My parents' attempts to minimize. The security footage. The restoration specialist this morning. She listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from concern to something harder, more resolute. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're done accommodating them." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I'm done." "Good. What do you need?" "I need to know if I'm crazy, if I'm overreacting, if this is worth the fight I know is coming." Sarah leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. "David, I watched you accommodate your family for 2 years after your wife died. Watched you swallow hurt and disappointment and outright manipulation because you thought Emma needed extended family more than she needed you to have boundaries. I never said anything because it wasn't my place. But I'm saying it now. You're not overreacting. If anything, you're underreacting. That footage you described? That's evidence of destruction of property, of an adult ignoring a child's distress, of your parents enabling abuse. Yes, abuse. Financial abuse is abuse. Emotional manipulation is abuse. And teaching Emma that her voice doesn't matter when she advocates against wrongdoing is setting her up for a lifetime of accepting mistreatment. The bluntness was exactly what I needed. Not coddling. Not both sides have valid points. Just clear-eyed assessment from someone who'd watched this pattern longer than I'd been willing to see it. "I emailed a lawyer last night," I said, "about formalizing boundaries. Maybe pursuing compensation for the watch. I don't know yet what I'm doing. I just know I can't keep doing what I've been doing." "Who'd you contact?" "Mitchell Greenberg. He does family law and mediation. I found him through the firm's legal contacts." Sarah nodded approvingly. "Mitchell's good. Fair but firm. He won't push you toward litigation if mediation is possible, but he won't let them steamroll you either." She paused. "Have you told Michael yet? About the restoration costs?" "I'm meeting him this afternoon. He offered to come by the house. Be honest with him. About all of it. He deserves to know what his watch is costing you, and he deserves the choice of whether to pursue his own legal action." "I know. I'm not hiding anything anymore. That's part of the whole point." She smiled slightly. "Good. Because the David I know is brilliant at designing spaces where people can be authentic, but terrible at demanding that authenticity from his own family. Maybe it's time your life matched your professional values." That hit harder than I expected. She was right. I spent my days creating homes where light and function and beauty intersected, where people could live honestly and comfortably. And then I went home to a family dynamic built on shadows and accommodation and pretending things were fine when they weren't. The cognitive dissonance had been eating at me for months. Years maybe. There was a knock on Sarah's office door. Catherine's assistant, Marcus, poked his head in. "Sorry to interrupt. David, there's someone here to see you. Says she's your sister?" My stomach dropped. Sarah's expression hardened. "Do not meet with her alone," she said quietly but firmly. "I'll come with you." I stood up, steadied myself. The confrontation was coming sooner than I'd anticipated, but maybe that was better. Let Rebecca come to my territory, my space, where I had witnesses and boundaries and wouldn't be ambushed in my own home. Marcus led us to the small conference room we used for client meetings. Rebecca was standing by the window, looking out at the city, dressed in expensive casual wear that screamed I drove 2 hours to deal with this inconvenience. She turned when we entered, and her expression cycled through surprise at seeing Sarah, irritation at not having me alone, then settled on performative concern. "David, we need to talk. You're not answering your phone and Mom is beside herself." "I'm aware she's upset," I said, keeping my voice level. "I needed space." "Space," Rebecca repeated like the word was foreign. "From your family? Over an accident?" "It wasn't an accident. It was negligence. There's a difference." Her expression tightened. "You're really going to do this? Make a federal case out of a broken watch?" Sarah spoke before I could. "Actually, destruction of property valued over $5,000 is a criminal offense in Oregon, as is breaking and entering, which applies if the watch was taken without explicit permission to alter or repair it. So yes, this could literally be a case. The only question is whether it becomes one." Rebecca's eyes flashed to Sarah, reassessing. "Who are you?" "Sarah Park. Senior architect here." also a witness to this conversation, so I'd suggest you think carefully about what you say next. The silence stretched. I watched Rebecca calculate, trying to figure out which angle would work. She settled on wounded sister. David, I came here to apologize. To make this right. But you're treating me like a criminal. You destroyed something irreplaceable, I said. You ignored my daughter when she begged you to stop. You dismissed her tears. You offered money like that would fix the harm you caused. Those aren't the actions of someone who's sorry. Those are the actions of someone who's sorry they got caught. Her mask slipped for just a second, showing the anger underneath. Always so self-righteous. You know, Mom's right. You do have a savior complex. Not everything is some grand moral drama, David. Sometimes things break. Sometimes mistakes happen. Adults move on. Emma is 8 years old, I said. And she knew better than you did. That should tell you something. She's a child. She doesn't understand how the world works. No, Sarah interjected. She understands that when someone asks you to stop hurting something they care about, you stop. That's not complex morality. That's basic human decency. Rebecca's face flushed. I don't have to stand here and be lectured by someone who doesn't even know the situation. Then leave, I said simply. You came here uninvited. You can leave the same way. She stared at me like I'd struck her. For a moment I thought she might actually listen, might actually turn around and walk out. Instead, she pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. Within seconds my own phone buzzed. She'd sent something to the family group chat. I pulled it out and read the message. Tried to apologize to David in person. He brought a lawyer and threatened me with criminal charges. This is what I get for trying to make peace. Some family. The manipulation was so practiced it was almost impressive. Framing herself as the victim, me as the aggressor, all while standing in my workplace after showing up unannounced. Sarah saw me reading it and shook her head slightly. Don't engage. Not here. Not now. She was right. I pocketed my phone without responding. Rebecca, I'm asking you to leave. If you want to communicate, you can do it through my attorney. You don't have an attorney. You're bluffing. I pulled out Mitchell Greenberg's business card. The one he'd emailed me that morning after receiving my inquiry. I set it on the conference table between us. I do now. And he'll be reaching out to you this week about restitution for the watch restoration costs, which currently stand at $6,000, as well as the emotional distress caused to my daughter. Rebecca picked up the card, read it, then threw it back down. You're insane. I'm not paying $6,000 for some old man's junk. Then we'll see you in court, Sarah said calmly. And David will bring the security footage showing you destroying property that wasn't yours while a child begged you to stop. Let's see how that plays with a judge. There it was. The moment Rebecca realized this wasn't going away, that I wasn't going to back down, that her usual tactics weren't working. Her face went through several emotions rapid fire. Shock, rage, fear. Then she settled on cold. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. You're choosing some stranger over your own family. Michael Torres isn't a stranger, I replied. He's been kinder to my daughter in 1 year than you've been in her entire life. And I'm not choosing him over family. I'm choosing accountability over enabling. There's a difference. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Then she paused, looked back. Mom and Dad are going to take my side. You know that, right? You're going to end up alone. Then I'll be alone, I said. But at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. She left. The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. I stood there for a moment, my heart racing. Adrenaline flooding my system now that the confrontation was over. Sarah put a hand on my shoulder. You did good, she said. That was hard and you did it anyway. I don't feel good. I feel like I just lit a match in a room full of gasoline. Maybe she acknowledged. But the room was already full of gasoline. You've been breathing those fumes for years. Sometimes you have to burn it out to breathe clean air again. We went back to her office. I was shaking slightly, the aftershocks of adrenaline making my hands unsteady. She poured me water from the cooler in the corner, made me sit down, didn't make me talk until I was ready. She's going to tell everyone I'm the bad guy, I said finally. She's going to spin this into a story where I'm vindictive and unreasonable, and she's the victim. Let her, Sarah said. The people who matter will see through it. The people who don't see through it were never on your side anyway. They just wanted you to keep absorbing the damage so they didn't have to deal with conflict. That felt true in a way that hurt. My parents' message had never been we want what's best for you. It had been we want what's easiest for us. And what was easiest was having one child who made waves and one child who smoothed them over. I'd been the smoother for so long I'd forgotten I was allowed to make waves too. My phone started ringing. Mom. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. Dad this time. Declined. Then a text from Mom. David, Rebecca just called crying. What did you say to her? Please call me. We need to discuss this as a family. Sarah saw me looking at the screen. You don't owe them an immediate response. In fact, you don't owe them any response until you're ready. I know. Just feels wrong. Like I'm abandoning them. They abandoned Emma first, she said bluntly. They watched your sister destroy something precious while your daughter cried and did nothing. You're not abandoning anyone. You're just finally declining to be abandoned. I stayed at the office until early afternoon trying to focus on work and failing. Catherine had come by to check on me, had been briefed by Sarah on the broad strokes, and had simply said take whatever time you need and we've got your back. The solidarity meant more than I could express. At 2 o'clock I drove home to meet Michael. He arrived exactly on time, parking his old Honda Civic carefully in front of my house. I watched him get out, moving with the deliberate care of someone whose body had earned its aches, and felt the weight of what I had to tell him settling in my chest. He smiled when he saw me, though it didn't reach his eyes. There was a tiredness there that hadn't been present the last time I'd seen him. David, thank you for making time. We sat in my living room. I offered coffee and he accepted, and we made small talk about the weather and Emma's progress on the Clemente until we couldn't avoid the real conversation anymore. He set down his mug and looked at me directly. So he said gently, tell me the truth. How bad is it? I told him everything. Walked him through the entire sequence of events, didn't minimize any of it. Showed him the photographs I'd taken of the pieces before bringing them to Gerald. Explained the restoration timeline and costs. His face grew more drawn with each detail, but he didn't interrupt. Just listened with the patience of someone who'd survived worse losses and knew how to hold grief. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he said, your daughter tried to protect it. She did. She understood what it meant to you. She fought for it harder than any of the adults there. His eyes glistened. Please tell her thank you. Tell her that her heart is beautiful and that I'm not angry at her. Not even a little bit. I will. Michael, I'm covering all the restoration costs. You won't pay anything. And if you want to pursue legal action against my sister, I have security footage that documents everything. I'll support whatever you decide. He shook his head slowly. I don't want legal action. I don't want your money either, though I appreciate the offer. What I want is already impossible. I want my grandfather's hands on that watch again. I want my wife to hold it one more time. I want the history that was erased back. I know I said quietly, and I can't give you that. I'm so sorry. You didn't do this, David. Your sister did. And your parents enabled it. But you and Emma, you honored what I trusted you with. Even though you couldn't save it, you tried. That matters. Doesn't feel like enough. It never does, he said. When I lost my wife, nothing anyone did felt like enough. But kindness still mattered, even when it couldn't fix what was broken. He paused, then added, I need to tell you something. That watch was insured. Not for much, maybe $2,000, but enough to cover some of the restoration. I'll submit a claim. You shouldn't bear this entire cost alone. I started to argue, but he held up a hand. Please, let me do this. Let me participate in trying to save what's left. It's my history. I need to be part of trying to preserve it. I nodded, understanding that this wasn't about money but about agency. About not being a passive victim in his own story. There's something else, I said. I'm establishing boundaries with my family. Real ones. It's going to get messy and they're not going to like it. I wanted you to know that you're. Watch what happened to it. That's what finally made me see that I can't keep protecting Emma from people who should be protecting her. Michael reached over and put his weathered hand on my shoulder. My grandfather used to say something. In Tagalog it sounds more poetic, but in English it's roughly you cannot build a home in a burning house. You must leave the fire to save yourself. Maybe that's what you're doing now. Maybe, I said. I just hope Emma understands. Children understand more than we give them credit for, he said. She already knows your family isn't safe. You walking away will just confirm what she already feels. And that confirmation, that validation that she's not crazy for being hurt, that's a gift you can give her even when you can't give back what was broken. We talked for another hour. He told me stories about his grandfather, about the war, about carrying that watch through immigration and poverty, and all the small indignities of building a life in a country that saw you as perpetually foreign. He told me about his wife, about the day he proposed with that watch in his pocket for courage, about the last time she'd held it before the Alzheimer's took even the memory of what it meant. By the time he left, we were both exhausted but somehow lighter. Shared grief was still grief, but it was less lonely. Emma came home from school on the bus, and I met her at the stop. She looked worried, like she'd been carrying dread all day. Did Mr. Torres come? He did. And he asked me to tell you something. He's not angry at you. Not even a little bit. He said your heart is beautiful and he's grateful you tried to protect what mattered to him. Her face crumpled with relief. Really? Really? Come on. Let's go inside. We made hot chocolate even though it wasn't quite cold enough yet, just because we needed something warm and sweet. Emma was quiet, processing, and I let her be. Finally, she said, "Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at you?" "Probably. I made some choices today they won't like." "Because of the watch?" "Because of a lot of things. The watch just helped me see clearly." She absorbed that. "Are we still a family?" "We'll always be a family, sweetheart. But sometimes families need space from each other. Sometimes love means having boundaries." She nodded like that made sense, even though I wasn't sure it fully did for me yet either. Then she asked, "Did you fight with Aunt Rebecca?" "I set some boundaries with her. She didn't like it." "Good," Emma said fiercely. "She should feel bad. She broke something important and didn't even care." Out of the mouths of children, indeed. The moral clarity of an 8-year-old, uncluttered by adult rationalization and excuse-making. Rebecca should feel bad. She'd caused harm. That wasn't cruel to name. It was honest. My phone buzzed again. Another message in the family group chat. This time from my Aunt Susan. "Can someone please explain what's happening? Rebecca is very upset and says David threatened legal action over an accident. This doesn't sound like the David I know." Sarah texted me separately. "Don't engage with the group chat. That's their territory. Make them come to your territory if they want answers." She was right. I muted the group chat and put my phone face down. Emma and I made dinner together, simple pasta with marinara, and ate while watching nature documentaries. Normal evening routines that felt precious because they were ours, uncomplicated by anyone else's agenda or drama. After dinner, she practiced piano for an hour, working through the Clementi with new determination. The piece was coming together, the difficult passages smoothing out with repetition and patience. I sat listening from the kitchen, washing dishes by hand even though we had a dishwasher, just to have something to do with my hands while my mind processed everything. The confrontation with Rebecca, Michael's grace, Sarah's unwavering support, the lawyer's card now sitting on my desk upstairs, the security footage backed up in 3 locations, the patterns finally visible after years of being too close to see them. My phone rang. Mitchell Greenberg, the attorney. I dried my hands and answered. "Mr. Chun, I've reviewed your email and the documentation you sent. I'd like to meet with you this week to discuss your options. This is a complex situation that touches on family law, property damage, and potentially eldercare if we're talking about guardianship issues with your parents. But before we meet, I need to ask you something directly. What outcome are you actually seeking here? Because that will determine our strategy." I looked into the living room where Emma was bent over the piano keys, her face serious with concentration. "I want my family to understand that what they did was wrong. I want accountability. I want to know that my daughter is protected from future harm. And I want Michael Torres to get back as much as can be restored of what was taken from him." "Those are reasonable goals," Mitchell said. "Some may be achievable through mediation. Some may require more formal action. Are you prepared for this to permanently damage your relationship with your family?" "The relationship was already damaged," I said. "I'm just finally admitting it." "Good. That clarity will help. Let's meet Thursday afternoon. Bring all your documentation, including that security footage. And Mr. Chun, one more thing. Stop responding to their messages. Anything you say can and will be used to paint you as unreasonable. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Make them come to the table if they want resolution. I'll see you Thursday. I hung up and looked at my phone. 7 unread messages now in the group chat. My parents calling. Rebecca calling. The family network working overtime to bring me back in line, to reestablish the equilibrium where I absorbed and they demanded. I turned off my phone completely. Emma looked up from the piano. Everything okay, Dad? Everything's going to be okay, I told her. It might get harder before it gets better. But we're going to be okay. She came over and hugged me, her small arms tight around my waist. I held her and thought about all the times I'd bent to keep peace, all the moments I'd swallowed hurt to maintain connection, all the years I'd believed that being strong meant enduring rather than enforcing boundaries. Sarah had been wrong about one thing. Not everything felt like enough. But maybe choosing differently finally was something I could build on. Maybe that was what Gerald had meant when he said some things shouldn't stay broken just because breaking them was easy. Rebecca had broken a watch. But my family had been breaking boundaries for decades. And I'd been letting them because I thought that's what love required. Emma pulled back and looked up at me. You know what Mr. Torres told me once? When I was frustrated because I couldn't get a piece right. What did he tell you? He said sometimes the only way forward is to stop playing what doesn't work and start over. Even if it means going all the way. Back to the beginning. I smiled despite everything. Mr. Torres is a wise man. Yeah, she said. He is. Then she went back to the piano and started the Clementi again. From the very beginning, playing each note with careful intention like she was building something new from familiar materials. I stood listening and realized I was doing the same thing. Starting over. Going back to the beginning of who I wanted to be as a father, as a son, as a person. Playing what worked and letting go of what didn't. The watch was still broken. The family was fracturing. The easy path was disappearing behind me. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally playing my own song. The meeting with Mitchell Greenberg happened on a Thursday afternoon in his downtown office. A space that managed to feel professional without being cold. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the Willamette River, and the furniture was comfortable in a way that suggested he actually cared about putting clients at ease. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with a directness I appreciated immediately. I brought everything. The security footage on a USB drive. Printed screenshots with timestamps. The receipt from Gerald Hoffman detailing restoration costs. Michael's emails. Photographs of the watch before and after. My own documentation of family patterns going back 2 years. Mitchell spread it all across his conference table like pieces of a puzzle he was assembling in real time. This is thorough, he said after reviewing everything. Almost obsessively so. How long have you been collecting this material? The watch incident was 4 days ago. But I've been documenting other things for longer. I didn't know I was building a case. I just knew I needed proof I wasn't imagining things. He nodded, still reading through the printed emails. That's common in family situations where there's gaslighting. You start documenting because you need external validation that your perception of reality is accurate. He looked up. And your perception is accurate, David. What happened with that watch isn't an isolated incident. It's a culmination of a pattern. The question is what you want to do about it. I want them to acknowledge what they did. I want my sister to pay for the restoration. I want my parents to understand they can't keep enabling her at everyone else's expense. And I want Emma protected from future incidents. Mitchell leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Let's talk about what's realistic. Acknowledgement is the hardest thing to get because it requires emotional growth and self-awareness. We can't compel that legally. Payment for damages is achievable, either through mediation or small claims court. Protection for Emma is something you already have control over through your own choices about contact and supervision. The real question is whether you want to pursue this through the legal system or handle it within the family. What's the difference? Legal system means filing a claim for property damage, possibly pursuing charges for destruction of property if the district attorney's office is interested, which they might not be given the dollar amount involved. It creates a public record. It's adversarial. It will permanently alter your family relationships, assuming they're not already permanently altered. He paused. Handling it within the family means I send a strongly worded letter outlining liability and consequences, We attempt mediation with me present as a neutral third party, and we see if they're willing to come to the table. It's less nuclear but also less enforceable. Which would you recommend? Mitchell smiled slightly. I'd recommend asking yourself what you'll regret more 5 years from now. Not getting financial restitution, or burning bridges you might want to rebuild someday. There's no wrong answer. But you need to be clear about your priorities. I thought about that. Thought about Emma getting older, potentially wanting relationships with her grandparents that I'd made impossible. Thought about holidays and graduations and weddings, all the future moments that might be complicated by choices I made now. But then I thought about the alternative. Emma learning that family could damage you repeatedly and face no real consequences. Learning that keeping peace meant swallowing injustice. Learning the same lessons that had kept me complicit for too long. I want to try mediation first, I said. But I want them to know that if they refuse or if they don't take it seriously, legal action is the next step. I want real consequences on the table, not just the threat of hurt feelings. That I can work with. Mitchell pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes. I'll draft a letter to your parents and your sister. It will outline the facts of what occurred, detail the damages both financial and emotional, and propose mediation within the next 30 days. It will also state clearly that failure to participate or reach an agreement will result in a civil suit for damages. He looked up. Are you prepared for them to refuse? Because there's a good chance they will, at least initially. Narcissistic personalities don't respond well to being held accountable. Then we file suit. I'm not bluffing about this. Good. Because if you threaten consequences you're not willing to follow through on, you lose all leverage and teach them they can call your bluff indefinitely. He made another note. Now let's talk about Michael Torres. He's the actual victim here. Does he want to participate in any legal action? He said he doesn't want to. He's a private person and he's dealing with his own grief. But I want to make sure whatever agreement we reach includes full restitution to him for the restoration costs, plus any insurance deductible he has to pay. Understood. I'll include that. Mitchell set down his pen. David, I need to prepare you for something. Even if mediation works, even if they agree to pay, the relationship you had with your family is over. You can potentially build a different relationship, one with clearer boundaries, but you can't go back to the way things were. Are you at peace with that? The way things were required me to absorb harm and pretend it didn't hurt. I'm not going back to that regardless. Then we have a plan. I'll have the letter drafted by tomorrow and sent via certified mail by Monday. You should expect immediate fallout. They'll likely try to contact you directly, either to rage or to plead or to negotiate around me. Don't engage. Everything goes through me now. That's why you hired an attorney. I left his office feeling simultaneously relieved and anxious. The machinery was in motion now. No more waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'd picked up the shoe and aimed it deliberately. There would be consequences I couldn't predict, relationships altered in ways I couldn't control. But the alternative, continuing to model dysfunction for Emma, was no longer acceptable. My phone had been off since Tuesday. 3 days of silence on my end while the family group chat presumably exploded and my voicemail filled up. I checked my email once and found 17 messages from various relatives, each trying a different angle. Aunt Susan's sympathetic concern. Cousin Brandon's bro-to-bro hey man maybe just let it go vibe. Even my Uncle Frank, who I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, suddenly weighing in about the importance of family unity. Sarah had been checking in daily, bringing coffee to my desk, running interference when Catherine asked questions. She'd also connected me with a therapist, someone who specialized in family systems and boundary setting. I had my first appointment scheduled for next week. The idea of therapy felt both necessary and like an admission of failure, though Sarah had been quick to dismantle that thinking. Therapy isn't for broken people, she'd said. It's for people who are finally ready to stop breaking themselves to fix others. Emma had been quieter than usual. Not withdrawn exactly, but watchful. She'd asked once if we were going to Grandma's for Sunday dinner, and accepted my no without argument. She'd asked once if Aunt Rebecca was mad at us and I'd said yes, probably, but that wasn't our responsibility to manage. She was processing in her own way, and I was trying to let her do that without downloading my own anxiety onto her. On Friday afternoon, Gerald Hoffman called. I've been working on the watch, he said without preamble. I wanted to give you an update. I've sourced most of the needed gears through specialty suppliers and one private collector. The crystal replacement is straightforward. But David, I need to tell you something about the engraving. My stomach tightened. What about it? The damage is worse than I initially assessed. The abrasive compound didn't just remove the surface layer. It ate into the metal itself in several places. I can stabilize what's there, but I cannot restore the illegible portions. The names will always be partially obscured. I paused the work because I wanted your permission before proceeding. Some collectors would argue that an incomplete original is more valuable than a completed restoration. But in this case, I don't think we're talking about collector value. No, we're talking about a man's family history. Exactly. So the question is, do I preserve it as is, damage and all? Or do I attempt to re-engrave what I believe the original text said based on the remaining letters and spacing? The second option means altering the original, which purists would object to. But it also means Michael could read his grandparents' names again. I thought about Michael's face when he'd talked about that watch. About the way he'd traced the engraving with his finger when showing it to Emma. About the fact that this wasn't about preservation for a museum. It was about memory for a living person who'd lost too much already. Re-engrave it, I said. As faithfully as you can. Talk to Michael first, get the correct spelling and details directly from him. But give him back their names if you can. I'll reach out to him today. Gerald was quiet for a moment. You're a good man, David. This situation, what your family did, it's not your fault. But the way you're handling it says everything about who you are. I'm just trying not to make it worse. You're doing more than that. You're trying to make it right. That's rarer than you'd think. After we hung up, I sat at my desk staring at blueprints for a renovation project I was supposed to be excited about. A young family's first home. Adding a nursery and updating the kitchen. The kind of work I usually loved, helping people create space for the life they were building. But I couldn't focus. Couldn't stop thinking about the letter Mitchell was drafting, about the moment my family would receive it and realize I wasn't backing down. Sarah appeared in my doorway with 2 coffees. You're spiraling, she observed. I can see it from across the office. That obvious? To someone who knows you, yes. She handed me a coffee and sat in my client chair. Talk. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. What if I'm overreacting? What if 10 years from now Emma resents me for cutting her off from her grandparents over something she barely remembers? First of all, she's not going to barely remember this. The watch breaking, your family's response, your choice to protect her. Those are formative memories. Second, you're not cutting her off from anyone. You're setting boundaries and giving them the choice of whether to respect those boundaries or exclude themselves. Third, and most importantly, you need to stop catastrophizing about hypothetical future regret and focus on actual present harm. Right now, today, your family is teaching Emma that her voice doesn't matter, and that people can damage what's important to others without consequence. That's the harm you're addressing. Deal with that first. When did you get so good at this? 2 years of therapy after my divorce, she said dryly. Turns out when your ex-husband gaslights you for a decade, you need professional help untangling reality from manipulation. I recognize the patterns in your family because I lived them in my marriage. And I'm telling you, David, every day you wait is another day Emma internalizes the wrong lessons. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing didn't make it easier. The weekend passed in strange suspension. Emma and I went to the farmer's market on Saturday, made homemade pizza Saturday night, spent Sunday at OMSI looking at science exhibits. Normal activities that felt fragile, like we were playing at normalcy while waiting for an explosion. My phone stayed off. I'd given Sarah my parents' number and Mitchell's number to Catherine, told them those were the only people who should be able to reach me in an emergency. Everything else could wait. On Sunday evening, Emma was getting ready for bed when she said, "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you scared?" "Of what, sweetheart?" "Of what's going to happen. With Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Rebecca. Are you scared it's going to be bad?" I sat down on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. "I'm nervous. Change is hard even when it's necessary. But I'm not scared of doing the right thing, even if it's uncomfortable." "Is it the right thing?" Her eyes were searching mine, looking for certainty I wasn't sure I possessed. "They're still our family." "They are. But family doesn't mean we accept being hurt. Family is supposed to be safe." And when it's not, we're allowed to ask for it to be different or create distance until it is. She thought about that. Mom would want us to be safe. The mention of Sarah, unexpected and direct, hit me in the chest. Yeah, she would. Your mom was really good at boundaries. Better than me. I'm still learning. I think you're doing good, Emma said. It's scary, but you're doing it anyway. That's what brave means, right? Out of the mouths of children. I hugged her, this small person who'd lost her mother and was now watching her remaining family fracture, and yet somehow still had the emotional intelligence to name things clearly. You're pretty wise for 8 years old, you know that? I have a good teacher, she said, and my heart cracked open a little more. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Mitchell's letter would be sent today. Certified mail requiring signature. 24 to 48 hours until it reached my parents. Maybe another day before Rebecca got hers in Seattle. Then the eruption. I turned my phone on for the first time in 5 days. 73 notifications. Text messages, voicemails, emails, social media messages from relatives I'd forgotten existed. I didn't open any of them. Just scrolled through, noting the volume, the escalation in tone based on preview text. Concern shifting to frustration, shifting to anger, shifting to guilt trips. The family system trying every tool in its arsenal to bring me back in line. I took screenshots of it all, sent them to Mitchell with a note. Documentation of harassment. Then I deleted the apps from my phone entirely. If anyone needed to reach me, they could call. And if they called, it would go to voicemail where Mitchell could review it. Sarah caught me in the break room. You look like you're preparing for battle. That's because I am. Good. Remember, you're not the aggressor here. You're responding to harm that already occurred. Don't let them flip the script. How do you always know what I'm thinking? 'Cause I've been where you are. And I had to learn the hard way that people who benefit from your lack of boundaries will do everything possible to maintain those non-existent boundaries. Your family's comfort has depended on your discomfort for a long time. They're not going to give that up easily. She was right. The family system had found equilibrium with me as the shock absorber and Rebecca as the chaos generator. Disrupting that would feel to them like I was the problem, not like I was addressing the problem. They genuinely believed they were the victims in this scenario because they couldn't see the harm they'd been causing. Or wouldn't see it, which amounted to the same thing. Work helped. I had client meetings, design reviews, site visits. Hours where I could focus on solving problems that had clear solutions and grateful recipients. A young couple thrilled with the sunroom addition I designed. An older client moved to tears seeing the accessibility modifications that would let her age in place in the home she'd lived in for 40 years. Reminders that my work mattered, that I was good at something, that my value wasn't contingent on family approval. Tuesday afternoon, Mitchell called. The letters were delivered. Your parents signed for theirs this morning at 10:15. Rebecca signed for hers at 1:40. You should prepare for contact. What kind of contact? Could be anything. Rage, denial, bargaining. Possibly lawyers of their own, though I doubt it at this stage. More likely they'll try to go around me directly to you. Do not engage. Any communication from them, you forward to me without responding. Understood? Understood. Good. I've made myself available for mediation next Monday through Wednesday. That's 1 week from when they received the letter. If they don't reach out to schedule by Friday, I'll follow up. If they refuse to participate or try to negotiate terms that don't include full accountability, we file suit the following Monday. The timeline was clear. The consequences were defined. There was no ambiguity left to hide behind. The call came at 4:30. My father. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message. I didn't listen to it, just forwarded it to Mitchell. 10 minutes later, my mother called. Same process. Then Rebecca. Then my father again. Then a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be Aunt Susan. I forwarded them all and turned off my phone. By Wednesday morning, Mitchell had listened to everything. Your father is angry and defensive, claiming you're being manipulated by outside influences, meaning me, and your friend Sarah. Your mother is in denial, insisting this is all a misunderstanding that can be resolved if you just talk to them without your lawyer present. Rebecca is threatening a countersuit for defamation and emotional distress, which is laughable and won't go anywhere. Your aunt is trying to play mediator but clearly taking your parents' side. None of them have expressed remorse or acknowledged harm to Michael or Emma. None of them have agreed to mediation. So we're going to court. Not yet. I'm sending a follow-up letter today. Sometimes the reality needs to sink in before people start taking it seriously. I'm giving them until Friday at 5 p.m. to agree to mediation. After that, we file. The waiting was excruciating. Each day felt stretched thin. Time moving differently when you're bracing for impact. Emma was picking up on my tension despite my efforts to hide it. She'd started having trouble sleeping, coming into my room at night with bad dreams she couldn't quite remember. I'd hold her and feel the weight of what my choices were costing her in the short term, hoping desperately that the long-term benefits would justify it. On Thursday evening, Michael came by with dinner. Homemade adobo and rice, comfort food he said his wife used to make. We ate together, the three of us, and he told Emma stories about learning piano as a child in Manila, about the teacher who'd been patient with him when he couldn't afford consistent lessons, about how music had saved him in ways he was still discovering. Emma listened with rapt attention, then said, "Mr. Torres, are you mad at my dad for what Aunt Rebecca did?" Michael looked at me, then back at her. "No, dear one. I'm heartbroken about my watch. But your father isn't the one who broke it. And he's doing everything he can to help fix it. Sometimes the people we love make mistakes. What matters is how we respond to those mistakes. Your father is responding with integrity. That makes me respect him more, not less. But his family is mad at him. Sometimes doing the right thing makes people angry, especially if they wanted you to do the easy thing instead. That doesn't mean the right thing stops being right." She absorbed that with a solemnity beyond her years. "I think my dad is brave." "I think you're both brave," Michael said. "It takes courage to try to protect something that matters. You showed that courage in my kitchen when you asked them to stop. Your father is showing it now by insisting they acknowledge what they did. Courage runs in your family, just maybe not in all branches of the tree." After Michael left, Emma helped me clean up. She was quiet, processing, then said, "I'm glad Mr. Torres isn't mad at you. I was worried." "Me too, sweetheart." "Dad, when this is all over, will things go back to normal?" "I don't think things will go back to how they were. But maybe we'll find a new normal that's better. One where people treat each other with respect and listen when someone asks them to stop." "I hope so." She paused, then added, "I think Mom would be proud of you." The lump in my throat made it hard to answer. "I hope so too." Friday arrived with crushing finality. 5 p.m. deadline. Mitchell had texted me at noon. "Still no response from your family regarding mediation. Preparing to file first thing Monday morning. Are you still committed to this course of action?" I'd responded immediately. "Yes. Proceed." At 4:30 my phone rang. "Mitchell." They called. "Your mother. She's agreed to mediation on behalf of herself and your father. She's asking if Rebecca will be required to attend." "What did you tell her?" "That Rebecca's attendance is non-negotiable, since she's the primary party responsible for the damages. Your mother said she'd talk to her. I gave them until Monday morning to confirm all parties will participate. If Rebecca refuses, we file against her individually and proceed with your parents separately if they want to settle. So we wait more. Just through the weekend." "David, I think they're starting to take this seriously." Your mother sounded shaken. "That's progress." "Progress toward what though? Toward actual accountability or toward finding a new way to manipulate me into backing down?" I didn't know and couldn't predict. All I could do was stay the course and trust that forcing the confrontation was better than avoiding it. The weekend was another exercise in suspended animation. Emma and I went to the zoo, watched movies, made cookies. I was hyper-focused on her, trying to give her pockets of normalcy and joy amid the chaos. She seemed lighter than she had in days, like my commitment to seeing this through had released some tension she'd been carrying. On Sunday night, as I was putting her to bed, she said, "Dad, whatever happens this week, I want you to know I'm proud of you. Even if it's hard. Even if they don't say sorry. You tried to make it right. That matters." I held her hand in the dark. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything." Monday morning, Mitchell called at 8 a.m. "Rebecca has agreed to attend mediation. We're scheduled for Wednesday at 2 p.m. at my office. Your parents will be there, Rebecca will be there, and I'll be there as the mediator. You'll be there as the affected party advocating for Michael Torres and Emma. Michael can attend if he wants, but given what he told you, I'm assuming he'll decline." "He will. He doesn't want to face them." Understandable. I need you to prepare something before Wednesday. A statement detailing the impact this incident has had on you and Emma, and the specific remedies you're seeking. Facts, not emotions, though you can certainly describe emotional impact. Think of it as your opening argument. Can you have that to me by tomorrow? I'll have it tonight. I spent Monday evening writing and rewriting a 3-page statement, describing the watch's significance, the sequence of events, Emma's distress and ongoing anxiety, the financial cost, the breach of trust, the pattern of behavior this incident represented, the specific outcomes I was requesting, full payment of restoration costs, a written apology to Michael Torres, a written acknowledgement that Emma's concerns had been valid and ignored, and an agreement to family therapy before any unsupervised contact with Emma resumed. I sent it to Mitchell at 11 p.m. He responded within minutes. This is good. Clear, specific, reasonable. See you Wednesday. Tuesday was endless. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't eat much, couldn't sleep. Sarah kept me company, talking me through worst-case scenarios and reminding me I'd already survived worse. You buried your wife, she said bluntly. You raised a grieving child alone. You can handle a difficult conversation with your parents. Wednesday morning arrived gray and cold, autumn rain turning the city slick and dark. I dressed carefully, business casual but not formal, trying to strike a balance between serious and approachable. Emma had school, and I'd arranged for Sarah to pick her up afterward and take her to her house. I didn't want Emma home alone waiting to hear how this went. Mitchell's office at 1:45. I was early. My parents arrived at 1:50, looking older than I remembered. My mother's face was drawn, makeup not quite covering the sleeplessness. My father's jaw was set in that stubborn way that meant he was angry but trying to control it. Rebecca pulled up at 1:58, cutting it close, wearing business attire and an expression of profound irritation. We gathered in the conference room. Mitchell at the head of the table, me on one side, my family on the other. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Mitchell opened with ground rules. Everyone would have a chance to speak without interruption. We were here to find resolution, not to attack. The goal was accountability and repair, not punishment. He looked at each person as he spoke, making sure they understood this wasn't a casual conversation. Then he nodded at me. David, would you like to start by reading your statement? My hands were shaking slightly as I picked up the pages. I'd practiced this, but having them all staring at me across the table made my throat tight. I started reading. Described what happened factually, clinically. Listed the costs, financial and emotional. Explained Emma's ongoing distress. Outlined what I was asking for. When I finished, the silence was heavy. My mother had tears in her eyes. My father was staring at the table. Rebecca was looking out the window, her jaw tight. Mitchell spoke into the quiet. Does anyone want to respond to what David shared? My mother cleared her throat. We didn't realize it had affected Emma so deeply. We thought children were resilient. We thought she'd move on. Children are resilient, I said. But that doesn't mean we should make them be resilient to things we could prevent. She shouldn't have to be resilient to watching her family destroy something precious and ignore her when she asked them to stop. Rebecca finally looked at me. You're acting like I murdered someone. It was a watch, David. An old watch that Michael was probably going to replace anyway. You're blowing this completely out of proportion to make yourself feel morally superior. Mitchell held up a hand. Rebecca, attacking David's motivations isn't productive. Let's focus on the facts. You destroyed property that didn't belong to you. That property has significant sentimental and financial value to its owner. David's daughter witnessed the destruction and was ignored when she tried to prevent it. Those are facts. How you feel about them doesn't change them. Rebecca's face flushed. Fine. I'm sorry it upset everyone. I'll pay for the stupid restoration. Can we move on now? That's not an apology, I said quietly. That's dismissal with a payment attached. Then what do you want from me? She was getting louder. You want me to grovel? You want me to admit I'm a terrible person? What exactly will satisfy you, David? I want you to acknowledge that what you did was wrong. Not inconvenient. Not unfortunate. Wrong. I want you to understand that ignoring Emma when she advocated for someone else's property taught her that her voice doesn't matter. I want you to recognize that this is part of a pattern where You take what you want and everyone else cleans up behind you. Here we go, Rebecca said. The pattern speech. You've been saving this up, haven't you? All the times you felt overlooked or undervalued. And now you're dumping it on me because I made one mistake. It wasn't one mistake, I said. But even if it was one mistake this big requires real accountability. Not minimizing. Not deflecting. Actual recognition of harm caused. My father spoke for the first time. Son, you've made your point. Rebecca has agreed to pay. Your mother and I will apologize to Michael ourselves. But all of this, it's tearing the family apart. Is that really what you want? To destroy our family over a watch? I'm not destroying anything, I said. I'm asking for something that should be basic. Respect. Accountability. Recognition that Emma's feelings and Michael's loss matter. If asking for those things tears the family apart, then maybe the family was already broken. That's not fair, my mother said. We've always tried our best with you and your sister. Maybe we made mistakes, but we did it out of love. Love doesn't require me to absorb harm silently, I said. Love doesn't mean Emma should learn that her voice doesn't count. Love should mean you care enough to change when you realize you've caused hurt. Mitchell intervened. Let's talk specifics. David has outlined 4 requests. Full payment of restoration costs currently estimated at $6,000. A written apology to Michael Torres. A written acknowledgement to Emma that her concerns were valid and should have been heeded. And family therapy before unsupervised contact with Emma resumes. Are these terms all parties can agree to? I'll pay the money, Rebecca said. But I'm not going to therapy. That's ridiculous. Then we don't have an agreement, Mitchell said simply. And we proceed to court. The room went silent. My parents looked at each other, some wordless communication passing between them. Finally, my mother spoke. We'll go to therapy. The 3 of us. If that's what it takes to see our granddaughter again. Rebecca stared at her. Mom, you can't be serious. I'm very serious, my mother said. And there was steel in her voice I'd rarely heard. Your father and I have been talking. Really talking. And we've realized that David is right. We've enabled you for too long. We've asked him to be understanding for too long. If therapy is what's required to repair this family, then we'll do it. Rebecca looked betrayed. So that's it? You're taking his side? There are no sides, my father said quietly. There's just a family that's broken and needs fixing. And if we're the ones who broke it, we're the ones who need to do the work. I watched this unfold with something close to disbelief. This wasn't how I'd expected it to go. I'd prepared for rage, for refusal, for having to follow through on court filings. Not for this tentative, painful movement toward accountability. Rebecca stood up. Fine. I'll write your stupid apologies. I'll go to your stupid therapy. But don't expect me to pretend this is reasonable. You're all acting like I'm the villain here when I'm just the only one honest enough to say that life is complicated and mistakes happen. Mistakes that go unacknowledged become patterns, Mitchell said. That's why we're here. Rebecca grabbed her purse and walked out. The door closed behind her with controlled force, not quite a slam but close. My mother wiped at her eyes. I'm sorry, David. For all of it. For not listening to Emma. For not seeing how much we'd asked you to carry. For choosing comfort over confrontation for so long. My father nodded. We'll make this right. However long it takes. Mitchell walked them through the specifics. Payment timeline. The therapy requirement, at least 6 sessions before revisiting contact arrangements. The written apologies to be reviewed by me before being sent to Michael and Emma. They agreed to everything. Signed paperwork making it binding. And then they left looking smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of what they'd had to acknowledge. I sat alone in the conference room with Mitchell after they'd gone. That was not what I expected, I said. It rarely goes this smoothly. You got lucky. Your parents genuinely care about maintaining a relationship with you and Emma. That gave you leverage. And your sister, for all her bluster, wasn't willing to lose her parents' support over this. What happens now? Now they do the work. Or they don't, and you enforce the boundaries you've established. But David, you need to understand something. This isn't over. This is just the beginning of a very long process of rebuilding trust, if trust can be rebuilt. Some of them will backslide. Some will resent you. You're going to have to hold these boundaries consistently, even when it's hard. I know. But at least now the boundaries exist. I drove home in the rain, emotionally exhausted but strangely lighter. I'd expected combat and gotten capitulation. Expected denial and gotten acknowledgement, however grudging. It wasn't everything I'd hoped for. Rebecca's apology would be perfunctory at best. My parents' understanding was still shallow, not yet internalized. But it was something. It was movement. Emma was waiting at Sarah's house. I picked her up and told her the basics. That everyone had agreed to make things right. That Aunt Rebecca would pay for Mr. Torres's watch. That Grandma and Grandpa had apologized and would be going to therapy. That we wouldn't see them for a while, but maybe eventually things could be different. She listened carefully, then asked, "Did Aunt Rebecca say sorry for not listening to me?" "She will. In writing. And it has to be a real apology, not a fake one, or she has to try again." "Good," Emma said. "Then I'm glad you made them listen, Dad. Even though it was hard." "Me too, sweetheart." That evening I called Michael and told him everything. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. "Thank you," he said finally. "For fighting for something I couldn't fight for myself. For making them see that what they destroyed mattered. For teaching Emma that justice is possible even when it's difficult. I wish I could give you back what was actually lost. You can't. No one can. But you've given me something almost as valuable. The knowledge that people still care about doing the right thing. That's been in short supply in my life lately." We talked for another hour. He told me Gerald had called him, had worked with him to recreate the engraving. That seeing his grandparents' names emerging again under Gerald's careful hands had made him weep. That the watch would never be what it was, but it would be something new. Something that bore the scars of what had happened but existed nonetheless. Like all of us, really. Scarred but existing. Damaged but not destroyed. 6 months later, on a cool spring evening, Gerald Hoffman called to say the watch was ready. I picked it up on my lunch break, carrying it home in its small velvet box like I was transporting something sacred. As I was. Michael came over that night. Emma answered the door and hugged him hard before leading him to the living room where I'd set the box on the coffee table. He opened it slowly. The watch gleamed under the lamplight, the brass polished but showing its age, the crystal clear but the face beneath marked by time. He turned it over and read the engraving, tears sliding down his weathered cheeks. My grandparents' names. My wife's name. All there again, visible and permanent. "It's not the same," he said softly. "But it's beautiful." Emma sat next to him and took his hand. "Mr. Torres, my dad and Mr. Hoffman worked really hard to fix it. I hope it makes you happy again." "It does, dear one. Not because it's fixed, but because it exists at all. Because people cared enough to try. That's what makes something precious. Not that it's perfect, but that it's loved." He stayed for dinner. We ate together, the three of us, and he told stories about his grandfather and his wife and all the history the watch carried. Emma listened with rapt attention, understanding in a way most adults never did that what mattered wasn't the object but what it represented. Connection. Memory. The proof that we'd existed and been loved. Later that week, my parents came over for their first supervised visit with Emma. 6 months of family therapy had softened them. Opened space for conversations we'd never been able to have before. They weren't transformed. Change like that takes years, not months. But they were trying. They listened when Emma talked. They asked permission before making plans. They acknowledged when they'd made missteps without requiring praise for the acknowledgement. Rebecca had paid the restoration costs. Had written apologies that took 3 drafts before they acknowledged actual harm without qualifiers. Had gone to therapy for the required sessions and then, surprisingly, kept going. She called once a month now. Stiff, awkward conversations where we talked about surface things, testing whether something deeper might eventually be possible. I didn't know if we'd ever be close. But we were honest now, and that was something. Emma thrived. Her piano recital that spring was flawless. The Clementi Sonatina played with confidence and joy. Michael sat in the front row, the restored watch in his pocket, and afterward told her she had her mother's grace. She beamed. That night, tucking her into bed, she said something I'd carry forever. "Dad, I'm glad the watch got broken." I blinked, startled. "Why would you be glad about that?" "Because it taught us we could survive hard things. That we could ask for what's right even when people don't want to hear it. That broken things can become something new if people care enough to try." She paused, thoughtful. Mom's death broke us. But we're still here. We're different, but we're still here. Just like Mr. Torres's watch. Out of the mouths of children. Wisdom I was still learning, delivered with the clarity only someone untainted by adult complications could manage. She was right. We were broken and repaired, scarred but standing, different but still ourselves. The watch sat on Michael's mantle now, ticking away the seconds of a life rebuilt. My family gathered occasionally, careful and tentative, learning new patterns. Emma grew, her voice strong and certain, knowing it mattered because I'd finally shown her it did. Some things can't be unbroken, but they can be honored. They can be grieved. They can be transformed into something that acknowledges both the damage and the healing. That's what we'd become. Not a perfect family. Not an undamaged one. But one that finally told the truth about what had broken and did the work to build something new from the pieces. And maybe that was enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.